Joining me now is Dr. Rene Paddags, Associate Professor of Political Science for the Ashbrook Center at Ashland University. Dr. Paddags, thank you for appearing on our political forum for the Election 20 telecast.
No, you're welcome.
Let's start with foreign policy. What differences do you see happening in America's current foreign policies if Biden is elected president?
Yeah, I think the first one that's going to happen is climate change. I think he's very much emphasized this, that climate change, the Paris Peace Accords, the Paris Climate Accords are going to be a big change for him. Of course, Donald Trump withdrew from them. That was one of his campaign promises 4 years ago, and Joe Biden would join that. Whether that's a good idea, that's, I think, for me, is still a bit out there, because I think what he would have to do is actually this time around convince the American people that this is a good deal for the United States to be part of. In a way, Donald Trump also didn't make the argument why it was such a bad deal. And so what I would hope for, if Joe Biden got elected, that he would make a persuasive case for this, and well, not just a persuasive case, but actually convince the American people that we're not, not just following some sort of crazy theory, but that this is really not something that is ultimately used by the Chinese against us. On the Chinese, I don't think much will change. I think this is one of Donald Trump's great foreign policy successes, that he has really moved the United States in a kind of like bipartisan way to be serious about China. For many years, many people in the foreign policy establishment in Washington, D.C. believed that China could really be transformed through economics. But as this was not panning out, and as the threat of Chinese foreign policy aims became clear, it's really Donald Trump that moved it around. So I think that's where you won't find a change. Iran is hard to say. The JCPOA, which is like an agreement between the 5 permanent members of the Security Council and Germany, so the 5+1, was an agreement that would allow Iran to use nuclear energy in a peaceful manner. But Donald Trump sort of like walked away from that agreement. And what is going to happen there is unclear. Whether this really can be walked back at all, even if Joe Biden wanted to. How would you reassure the Iranians that that's a good idea? Plus, of course, for foreign policy treaties, you ultimately need the consent of the Senate. And so, if the Senate still has a Republican majority, Joe Biden will not get an agreement. And in part, why Donald Trump could walk away from that agreement was because President Obama was not able to get an agreement in the Senate because the Republicans were so strongly opposed to this agreement.
Yeah, there was no leveling out.
So for Biden then to say, to come back, okay, Iran, we're going to make we're part of this deal again, and then the Iranians would be like, yeah, but we have no reassurance that in 4 years you're not going to walk away from it again. And so that could be changed if there was actually a treaty.
That trust, for sure.
But I think that's highly unlikely. And I think there are actually quite a few Democrats as well who secretly were not that unhappy that the United States, that Donald Trump walked away from this. Especially, what you have to keep in mind is that Israel was very much opposed to this. So any district in the United States that had maybe like a strong support for Israel it might be vulnerable to that. So New York, of course, but even California maybe as well, Florida.
How has the COVID-19 virus and President Trump's response to the virus affected U.S. diplomacy with other nations?
Well, that's very hard to say. or it's very hard to separate the COVID-19 response from sort of like a general dislike of Donald Trump. Because I think in many countries around the world, what Donald Trump's sort of like, how was it described, bedside manners.
Yes.
Yeah. How he sort of like.
How he just treats everyone in general, or
how he can, right? I mean, sometimes
how
he
he
was
can improve upon it.
Sometimes he was just very, very brusque in his demands and embarrassed other leaders, and then they had very little room to work with him because, by seemingly sort of playing along with him, even if they agreed with him, domestically they would become vulnerable to their internal domestic critics, and so of course, like overall, the U.S. response has been perceived as quite inconsistent, let's put it that way. Okay. And so other countries have not. It hasn't helped the United States. Okay. Now, on the other hand, right? So China has seemingly been quite successful. They've really locked down the country, Wuhan, many regions, and then the media reports you read now are that it's very. That the virus is fully under control. Well, the issue is that so what you would assume is that China really has benefited now from this. However, when you talk to Europeans, when you talk to other leaders in the world, they don't actually, or even the people, they don't quite buy that. Okay. There is more agreement around Donald Trump saying, criticizing China for keeping it secret for so long, for letting it get out of control. Yeah,
that was everywhere in the news, in the media.
Yes, yep. So again, like so Donald Trump might be the one who's most openly criticizing China for it. But the other European leaders have not really bought into the Chinese line. At the same time, they cannot bring themselves to support Donald Trump.
And the briskness came back with the answers and the bluntness and
everything. I mean, admittedly, it looks I think 4 weeks ago the situation already looked quite different. Europe had it seemingly all under control. Yes. The United States had numbers 70, 80,000 new cases a day. Right. And so the United States really looked terrible. But you look at the current numbers coming out of Europe, severe lockdowns in Ireland, in parts of Germany, the entire Madrid region is on lockdown again. France has, if we had the same number of new cases a day, we would have twice as many new cases, because that's sort of like the per capita rate that France has right now. So the situation in France is much, much worse than here. And so, of course, then now, if you're European, you can't quite, it makes it impossible to criticize the United States, right. That has had high numbers for a longer period of time, but has sustained it. Now, and then the other one is, it looks like the U.S. economy is the most resilient of all of them. Okay. So, and of course, then there's the criticism. How could you weigh casualties, COVID deaths against GDP numbers? So there's a certain moral outrage about this, an understandable one. But I think the argument also has been made that if you solely focus on COVID cases, what happens to someone who has cancer and cannot get a hospital bed for their cancer treatment? So in that sense, you're favoring now COVID patients over cancer patients, and whether that's a ethically more correct judgment is also up in the air. Yeah. So, but right now you certainly don't hear much criticism from Europeans anymore, right? Because the numbers in their countries are as bad, if not worse.
Absolutely. Thank you for your insights, Dr. Paddags, and thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Okay, you're welcome.
Now let's go back to the Election 20 update set.